Hello everyone and welcome to this new video in which we will finish our bolt pistol magazine. We will first make some adjustments, model the two small grooves that we can see here, as well as the small reliefs on the bottom. This work will allow us to better understand what is topology, and to use the subdivision surface modifier, which allows us to smooth a 3D model. Let's start with the simplest. We are going to widen the magazine a little bit because as it is here it seems a little narrow compared to the rest. So for that, nothing could be simpler. We scale the object along the y-axis. On the other hand, we have just scaled the entire object, so now the lower part has become much too wide. So we are going to correct that by directly editing the faces in edit mode. So we switch to edit mode with the tab key. I select these two faces and I scale them again along the y-axis, but this time the deformation applies only to the selected faces. Then, to save time, we will symmetrize the model. Let me explain all the details that we will model on one side of the object. So for example, the two grooves, we will also have to model them on the other side. So rather than doing this work twice, we're going to cut our object in half and only work on one half. And the other half is going to be generated automatically with a modifier called mirror. So we start by dividing the object in two. To do this, we go to edit mode, and we create an edge loop with the loop cut and slide tool. The little trick to center the loop is simply to right-click after creating the loop. Like that, we create a loop, but we don't slide it, which will center it automatically. Now we are going to delete all the faces on this side. So I switch to transparency with Alt+Z, and then I select all the faces on that side to delete them with the X key. Then we will make sure that all the edges and vertices located on the symmetry plane are coplanar. So to do this, first let's isolate the object, align the view on an axis, Z-axis for example, to switch to a top view. Then we switch to edit mode, we enable transparency, and there we can see that everything is perfectly flat. And in addition, the origin is also in the same plane, which is perfect because the object's origin position will be used to determine the symmetry direction and origin. If the origin were not well placed on the symmetry plane, you would have to move the origin using transform effect only origin option. So now let's find the mirror modifier in the modifier tab. This modifier will generate the second half of the object. So we want to mirror our object through y-axis. So here I choose y, and I uncheck x because I don't want any symmetry on the x-axis. Then we can enable clipping. I'll show you quickly what it's for. When using a mirror modifier, if a vertex is placed beyond the symmetry plane, it ends up on the other side of the mirror. And that gives us this kind of situation that we would rather avoid. And that's what clipping is for. It prevents vertices or edges from being positioned beyond the symmetry plane. We will also check the merge option, which allows us to merge vertices from each side that are located on the symmetry plane. So when we will export the object, we will have a clean single mesh, rather than two meshes with overlapping vertices. Okay, we have a good setup now. We can start modeling. To model these two grooves, we need to cut these faces to draw an edge loop on each side of each groove. So let's do it with loop cut and slide tool. I place the loop here. I start again to create another loop there, then another loop here, and the fourth there. Then we will make sure our topology is correct to model the bottom reliefs. So let's count how many faces we need. On the drawing we can see 1, 2, 3, and 4 elements. And the problem is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 faces. So we have too many faces. So we need to clean the topology for the bottom, and sometimes it's easier to start from nothing. So no mercy for these edges. Let's dissolve them all. So I select all the bottom edges, those two. We will also dissolve those two. And to dissolve, as a reminder, the shortcut is X key, and then we choose dissolve edges. Now it's a little cleaner. And what we are going to do, in order to model the reliefs, is add 3 loops, which will divide this face into 4 equal faces. And so now, we have what we need to model the reliefs. We will start by inserting new faces into these ones. So I select the 4 newly created faces, and for that, we can use the shorted path tool. We select the first face, we hold down the Control key, we select another face, and Blender will select everything between both. Then with the Inset tool that we can find in the Face menu, and whose shortcut is I, we will insert some faces to add details. But there, as you can see, it's narrower than there. It reminds us of a problem we already had with the Extrude tool. So I'm going to undo what I did, go back to object mode, and here we can see that it's simply because we have a non-uniform scale on Y. So we just need to apply the scale. And now if I start again with the I key, this time it's perfectly balanced. Then we will start again, in order to be able to model each element. So I select the 4 faces, and I insert other faces, but this time, I press I twice, a first time, and a second time, and there the tool does not insert a global face, but several faces inside each face. Then I switch to normal axis orientation in order to set Z axis perpendicular to my faces, and I'm going to move them like this just to create the relief. Now we have a problem. We have 8 elements, and we want to have only 4 over all the object depth. It often happens when working with a mirror, so we will have to merge all these faces. And to do this, nothing simpler, I select all these faces, I switch to global orientation to set Y-axis perpendicular to the symmetry plane, and I simply move all faces towards symmetry plane, and since we check the well options in the mirror modifier, faces will clip against the mirror and be merged with vertices on the other side of the mirror. We still have a little problem. Now there are faces inside the object, and that is not at all compliant. It will create problems when exporting. So what we're just going to do is removing those faces, very easy, and now we have something much cleaner. So now let's model the grooves. First we need to arrange the topology a little in order to finish to draw the groove's profile. I'm talking about the semicircle that we can see at the end of each groove on the draw. So we will create new edges to complete the shape of each grooves. But here we still have a lot of edges that won't help us at all. So like before, no mercy for edges that bother us, we dissolve all that. And now we can start from a blank page, so to speak. This allows us to use the knife tool to redraw our topology. So let's do that. For now we'll draw half circles only with 5 vertices. The reason is to round the shape rather than using a lot of edges, as we did for this object here with a bevel. Here we will do otherwise. We will use a modifier that will smooth our topology, and this will round off these edges. So we don't need to add too many edges, 5 should be enough. On the other hand, what we have just done has created several ingons, one there, one here, and this one, which is really disgusting. It will create big problems later. But for the moment, let's leave it like that. It will allow me to show you why it is necessary to avoid ingons, and to show you how to correct that. So here we go. Let's apply a subdivision surface modifier, and there, watch your eyes, it's going to sting a little bit. Oh yes, it's awful. It gives us something really not beautiful at all. So why is that? First, we don't want everything to be smooth. We would like some edges to remain sharp, with a nice straight angle here for instance, but the modifier is not able to make the difference alone, so we will need to tell him which edges should remain sharp. The second problem is ingons. The subdivision surface modifier doesn't like ingon at all, because it doesn't know how to subdivide them properly, so it gives us all these shit everywhere. So let's start by telling Blender which edges we'd like to keep sharpened. For the moment, I disable the modifier to see more clearly, and we will start, for example, with these edges, which must remain sharp. So I select them, starting with the first, hold Control, and select the last. And there we are going to apply them a crease with the Edge Crease tool. This tool allows us to set a value between 0 and 1 with the mouse, but we want the maximum. So with the keyboard we can just press 1, then press Enter to validate. Here, as you can see, edges with an edge crease of 1 are now purple. So now if I enable the modifier, we see that creased edges have been smoothed between them, so we have a nice curve, but while preserving an angle with the other segments. So now we just have to set a crease value of 1 for all edges, which must remain sharp. So this is the case for all these edges. We also need to crease the groove's profile, because when we are going to extrude the inside faces, these edges will have to be sharp. I select all those too, and globally all those too. Let's crease right now this selection. So the shortcut is Shift+E, and then since we want crease value to be 1, I press the 1 key with the keyboard, and I validate with Enter. Then we will have to apply a crease to all bottom reliefs. Indeed, we don't want them to be rounded, we want them to be sharp. So what I'm going to do is, select all these faces like that, these two, I select everything, and then if I set a crease to these faces, in fact, it will set a crease to all the edges which belongs to the faces. So I can directly type Shift+E, 1 and Enter. I think we're done, all edges are set correctly. Oh no, these two are missing, so let's crease them. Okay. We can now take a look at the result with the modifier enabled. And yes, it's much better. The whole bottom is very sharp. Here we have a nice smooth curve. Here I forgot these edges, so I apply a quick crease with Shift+E, 1 and Enter, and voila! We still have some dirty things left here, that's because of the end gone, so we're going to fix that. When you use a subdivision surface modifier, all faces of your object must have 4 and only 4 vertices. So we will have to change the topology again. Here we have a 5-sided polygon. How to fix that? If I want to turn it into several 4-sided polygons, I will have to cut this face, but also all the face loop. And it bothers me to create an edge loop here, because it will generate plenty of edges that we don't need at all. Well, I can simply add a 6th vertex here. So let's do that. But before, once again, we're going to dissolve all these edges. It will be easier to draw them again rather than modify the topology. And now, back in side view with transparency enabled, equipped with my knife, I draw these 4 sides faces. Once that's done, we will be able to connect vertices we just created to the edges we added to model bottom reliefs. And we do the same on the other side. Okay, now let's fix the last end gone. So there the problem is that here we have 2 faces, and here we have only 1. That is meaning we have to turn 2 faces to 1 face, and that's not possible. So here we don't have choice. We must create an edge loop to split these faces in 2. So I use Ctrl+R to create a loop in the middle, and with a right click I center the loop. And now, it's very easy to create new quad faces by connecting some edges together. Oops, I shouldn't have cut here, so I dissolve that edges, and here you go, all our faces are now quads. Here I need to set a crease again. So with Shift+E, 1 and Enter. And now if I display the modifier again, everything is clean. We will be able to extrude the 2 grooves now. So I select these faces, and with a simple extrusion, using the E key, we model the groove's depth. Oops, I forgot a face. I start again, and that's it. Look how this is now giving us this nice roundness here. And we can smooth even more by adding more subdivision levels in the modifier settings. Then, here I realize that I have a little problem. It's simply because while extruding, I created faces here below, and therefore now we have 2 faces which are overlapping, which is not good. To correct all that, we will simply delete all the faces above. And now we will close all using the Fill tool. So for that, I select all the top vertices. So I start with this one, I hold Ctrl, then select this one, and everything between the shorted path is selected. And now with the F key I close everything. Obviously, we just created an end-on, which is the kind of thing Subdivision Surface does not like. So let's disable the modifier for now, and with the knife tool, I think we won't have too much difficulties to split these end-on into quads. Just few cuts and it's done. And let's see how it looks like with the modifier. Well, that's not too bad. And what we can do now is adjust things a little. For that, I'm going to tell you a bit about these 4 buttons here. The first camera-shaped button enables the modifier when rendering an image. It allows us to add modifiers that are only visible in the viewport and not when rendering, so we won't use this button too much. The one looking like a screen enables the display of the modifier in the viewport. We have already used it several times. If we uncheck it, the modifier is no longer visible. This one, which looks like a square, will allow us to display the modifier when working in edit mode. So here, for example, I am in edit mode, and I can see the preview of the modifier effect. Whereas if I uncheck this button, the modifier effect won't be calculated in edit mode. And the last one, the triangle, which I call the WYSIWYG mode, allows us not only to see the effect in edit mode, but to see final result while being able to edit topology. That is meaning, with this button enabled, we can now directly edit the geometry as if the subdivision was applied. Except that we still have access to the low polygons topology, which is awesome. If we go back to a side view with transparency enabled, there I can adjust vertices position to improve the curve, and what I see is what I will get in object mode. So there, for example, I cheat a little with the drawing because I don't really like how it looks like if I follow the drawing. And that's it. Well, we can continue to adjust few things, but I think it's starting to be perfect like that. I would even say that we have finished this part of the gun. One last little thing we can do quickly is fix these faces. Normally they should be flat, but there is an angle there. So I select these edges very quickly. I switch to transparency mode. I change the orientation of the axis. And well, it doesn't quite work as I want, so we'll do it by hand. Let's move the selection with G key and try to position faces correctly. And here we can use a very nice shortcut. When we need to slightly transform something, sometimes the mouse is too reactive. But if we hold the Shift key while moving our object, we can move things very smoothly. So here it is. It allows us to be very precise. And there I have a rotation to do, and the rotation is even more reactive. So I hold Shift, and it allows me to slightly rotate faces. And here we have finished the magazine. And that's all for this video. Thank you for watching it, and I'll see you very soon.